y'all, I'm Deborah. Welcome to my channel. So this is a start of a new kind of project, new chapter in the life of Demeter Finds Her Way. I wanted to start talking about books that I'm reading or books that I want to read. Part of that is to demystify some of these books, and some of that is to hold myself accountable for reading the things that I say I want to read. And the kinds of books that I want to read. I have in the past read, I don't want to call them garbage books, but genre fiction just for fun. I love reading the classics, but I've not dived into them in the way that a lot of people who are academics do. I read them for fun, just for fun. But I would like to go a little bit more systematically about them. So I am setting, running the flag up the pole and shooting off my cannon and taking the first step into being a more literary reader. I've read classics since I was very small. I read Gulliver's Travels for a 6th grade book report. I wrote another book report that year on David Copperfield. So big, heavy classics have never frightened me or intimidated me. But I've perhaps not gotten out of them what I could have. Partially because when you're 11 years old, there are a lot of things that you have not experienced and have not seen. I read Anna Karenina when I was in the 10th grade in high school. There are a lot of things that are different, that I look at differently as a 50-something. So I'm going back through. So the first book I want to talk about that I have committed to reading is the aforesaid Anna Karenina. This was written by Leo Tolstoy. It takes place in the late 19th century. It was first published in 1873. It is a big monster of a book. And I got excited about this because I went to the library to check out books, and I noticed that they had a brand new copy on the shelf. It had never been opened. The little ribbon bookmark on it was still folded up inside the book where it was from manufacturing, and it smells like new paper. So I thought, I am going to read this before anybody else gets their chance to put eyes on the words on the page. So I have been working on it a couple of weeks. I've gotten about this far. And I am making notes I started a reading journal so that I can make notes about things that I have read. Because I can't annotate in this one because it has to go back to the library. So I'm trying to think about how to do some of these things. The story, it has a boatload of characters, all with long Russian names that sometimes sound alike, but there is actually a guide at the front of this book. This is a Penguin Classics, their newer version of the hardback in the Penguin Classics. It's a nice volume. But you can see it's a library book, so it's got to go back in a few weeks. A lot of different characters in here. Anna, the title character, actually, she kind of stands as a symbol for a lot of the other characters in the book. She is not necessarily the main character, but in some ways she is kind of by this part in the book, I'm about a third of the way through. She seems to be kind of a stand-in amalgam of things that are going on with the other characters. So I will talk about this one next month after I finished it. Okay, the next book that I wanted to read, since it is heading into October, was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This book is also called The Modern Prometheus. That was her subtitle. The title of the book is actually Frankenstein or The Modern Prometheus. This is considered one of the first horror novels it was originally published in the early 1800s. Um, she was friends with Percy. She was married to Percy Shelley, friends with Lord Byron, just part of that group of that little literary clique. And her mother was actually a feminist, one of the first feminist authors. Her mother was Mary Wollstonecraft and wrote A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, which is on my list in here of something to read at some future point. So I would like to read Frankenstein. It seems to be a different story from what we have seen of the film and versions of the story, the film adaptations. So I am looking forward to reading this one this month. Then moving on to other kind of horrific things. Sounds like a weird segue there. Next on my list to read is Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. This was, well, I'll just read to you what's in here. Heart of Darkness is widely regarded as a masterpiece for its vivid study of race and the greed and ruthlessness of imperialism. Joseph Conrad's poignant novella traces a metaphoric journey into the darkest depths of human nature, following Marlowe, a riverboat captain, on a voyage into the African Congo. Astounded by the brutal depravity he witnesses, Marlowe becomes obsessed with meeting Kurtz, a famously idealistic and able man stationed farther along the river. What he finally discovers, however, is a horror beyond imagining. So I am looking forward to... I've never read Heart of Darkness, and I want to see for myself what all the fuss is about. Apparently it's one of those books that you either love it or you hate it. We'll see. I'm ashamed that I've had this book in my collection for years and never opened it. That's part of what I want to rectify with my reading program. All right, so moving from the European colonization of Africa to an African novel. This is Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achibe. He is considered by some as the father of the African novel. But his story, unfortunately, he never won the Nobel Prize. I thought he was a Nobel Prize winner, but he did not. His comment was that the Nobel Prize was important, but that it was a European prize and not an African prize. And he died without ever having been recognized by the Nobel Prize people for his important work in African literature. So this story, let's see, I'll read you what's on the back. Things Fall Apart tells two intertwining stories, both centering on Okonkwo, a strong man in an Igbo village in Nigeria. The first, a powerful fable of the immemorial conflict between individual and society, traces Okonkwo's fall from grace with the tribal world. The second, as modern as the first is ancient, concerns the clash of cultures and the destruction of Okonkwo's world with the arrival of aggressive European missionaries. So this novel seems to be a good complement to reading Heart of Darkness. It seems like reading those together may be kind of interesting. All right, the other two books that I'll have on my list for this month, or however long it takes me, are two that I have actually started and not finished for various reasons. I think both of them got hijacked by my dissertation, and 3 years later I'm just now getting back to them. So the first one I want to read is by Willa, Cather. It's Death Comes for the Archbishop. This is a story based on the life of the first Archbishop of the Diocese of New Mexico when it was kind of divided out as its own diocese. That's about all I can tell you about it right now. Willa, Cather, it's got more of a character study than any sort of adventure novel that I'm used to reading. So, yeah, I want to finish this one. I even took the bookmark and put it back in the very beginning so I wouldn't even know where I stopped. All right, and then every month I want to pick out one nonfiction because I really don't read a lot of nonfiction for enjoyment. I read, as a university professor in a science, I read textbooks, I read scientific journal articles. So when I get home and want to read stuff, I'm usually reading, Lord of the Rings or Anna Karenina or, whatever kind of garbage that I can just pull off real quick at the library and dive my head into, just to kind of escape from the academic world for a bit. But this was a book that I started and was really interested in and excited about, and I got, like I said, at some point my writing my dissertation took over and everything else just went back on the shelf. And now 3 years later, after finishing it, I'm finally getting around to getting back to what I wanted to do. But this book is a nonfiction book. It is called Quiet: The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. Now, it would seem like introversion would not be something that would be of interest to someone who spends part of her time talking to people on YouTube, on the internet. But it really is more about how you approach problem solving, how you approach interactions with other people, how you spend or draw energy from relationships. And so I want to read this one and finish it. You can see I stopped right here. This is the poor, sad, folded up Post-it note that I was using for a bookmark, which is firmly at the end of chapter 2. But on the back cover of this book, it says at least 1/3 of the people we know are introverts. They are the ones who prefer listening to speaking, who innovate and create but dislike self-promotion, who favor working on their own over working in teams. It is to introverts, Rosa Parks, Chopin, Dr. Seuss, Steve Wozniak, that we owe many of the great contributions to society. In Quiet, Susan Cain argues that we dramatically undervalue introverts and shows how much we lose in doing so. She charts the rise of the extrovert ideal throughout the 20th century and explores how deeply it has come to permeate our culture. She also introduces us to successful introverts, from a witty, high-octane public speaker who recharges in solitude after his talks to a record-breaking salesman who quietly taps into the power of questions. Passionately argued, superbly researched, and filled with incredible stories of real people, Quiet has the power to permanently change how we see introverts, and equally important, how they see themselves. So both of my kids, who are young adults, or adults, have read this book, and they have both said they recommended this book to me. In fact, I think this was one I actually gave my son, and when he decluttered it in my direction. So that is my list of books that I am working on right now that I hope to at least make some progress through in the month of October. This one, the Anna Karenina, I've been looking at some YouTubes on how to approach this book, and one of the recommendations for some of the people is that read it in very small sections, so that you read it and then think about it a while and maybe go read something else and come back to it. I don't know if that would work for me or not, because I really need to figure out what's going on with Levin and Kitty. I need to figure that out. I don't think I want to wait too long on that. So, and I want to know when Anna's husband is going to get tired of her messing around with Vronsky and stop acting like an idiot. So I got to finish this one. All right, y'all. I'll see you next month with the results of my read and plans for November. Thanks. Bye.